What's up, everybody? Wherever you may be in life's journey, I am glad that I get to be here with you, and I am glad that you are here on this earth. So, a lot's been going on in the world around immigration, around deportation, around treatment of people who are here in this country who were born in other countries. And a lot has been made about JD Vance, a Catholic convert, being in kind of a public conflict with Pope Francis and kind of a public conflict with the church, even a public conflict with Cardinal Dolan as well, over the church's frustration and concern with how the Trump administration is handling immigration, and the Trump administration, particularly JD Vance, being a bit perplexed by the church's stance on the way that deportations are taking place, mass deportations, as a general principle. And in the midst of this back and forth, in the midst of this public discourse, JD Vance, in defense of what of the immigration policy of the administration, he evoked Ordo Amoris, a biblical principle that was really unpacked by Saints Thomas Aquinas and Saint Augustine. And Ordo Amoris is a Latin phrase, and the idea, it's called order of love, and the idea is simple. It's if you love God first, if you love God first above all else, a domino effect of love will emerge. The love for God will turn into a healthy love of self. And then the love for yourself will open your heart to a greater capacity for loving those closest to you, your family, your faith community, your literal neighbors, the people you go to the gym with, the people you play basketball with, your men's group or women's group at church, or whatever it may be, right? The people who are literally closer to you. The love for yourself will open up your heart to a greater capacity for loving those people. And one of the reasons why this is really useful is that if you're struggling to love those who are closest to you, or you're struggling to love yourself, that you can experience those things as a call to return to the most basic, fundamental component of the faith, which is get better at loving God. So if you're struggling to love people around you, or you're struggling to love yourself, it's like, don't go to some guru who's like, I'm going to teach you how to love yourself. Don't go to, some self-help person who's going to say, like, these are 5 steps on how to love difficult people. You can gain some good wisdom from that if you're in practical challenges. But for the most part, the challenge that you're facing is a heart capacity for love. And that you shouldn't turn to the guru. You shouldn't turn to the 5 practical steps on how to love difficult people. Instead, get better at loving God and being loved by God. Get into a healthy relationship with God, and what will naturally emerge out of that healthy relationship with God is a healthy love of self. And then that healthy love of self will then help you to love other people. And this comes from Jesus talking about the 2 most important commandments, which is love God and then love neighbor as yourself, right? Love neighbor as yourself. And so Saints Thomas Aquinas and Saint Augustine would say, okay, that creates an order of love. Love God, love yourself, and then based on the love that you've received from God, and now your understanding of what healthy self-love is, you're now in the best position possible to love those around you. Now, there's obviously a lot of controversy around what JD Vance is saying, what Vice President Vance is saying, and its implications for immigrants, right? He is essentially pointing to this biblical principle, this principle of the faith that he belongs to basically say you can apply the same order of logic to a family and then to a country. If you get first principles right, if you are able to love your family, then you're in a better position to love those who are closest to you, which means you're a better position to love your community. And then as a country, if you take care of and prioritize your own citizens, and you do well by taking care of your own citizens, it then creates a greater ability to expand that care to those who are closest to you, and then those who are further from you. Now, whether or not you can apply that logic of love God, love self, love neighbor to a country and to an immigration policy, there's obviously a lot of controversy around what he's saying and its implications for immigrants. And, I don't pretend to be really well versed in what's happening with deportations and what's not happening with deportations to be able to give you a strong opinion on this. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because for me, it's been a really important and impactful and challenging lens to evaluate my own spiritual status. Like, I'll leave to you, you leave to me whether or not this is effective to think about as a country, a policy as a country. But it is absolutely relevant to every single one of us in our own spiritual states as individuals. Because if I truly despise parts of myself, if I care about the world but hate those closest to me, if I keep getting lost in my own bubble, then I'm not as close to Jesus as I ought to be. And I actually need to reassert that primary relationship and firm the foundation of that primary relationship. I need to do that in order to find healing and find compassion for myself, specifically for parts of myself that I don't particularly like. And I need to find a greater capacity once I'm able to love God and love self. I'm able to experience a greater capacity then to love other people. Ordo Amoris is a principle to, in many ways, both evaluate the fruit of your faith or lack thereof and the formula for growth. And I think with Lent just a couple of weeks away, it's actually a phenomenal reminder of how important the basics are. Seek first the kingdom of God. Love God first. And that love will spill out everywhere in ways that are good, true, and beautiful. So I love it. I love that Ordo Amoris is in the public discourse. Obviously, there's a lot of emotion around immigration and the Trump administration and all these things that you're experiencing. I want to be mindful of that. I want to be intentional with that. But I love that Ordo Amoris is in the public context. And here's another thing I love that I recognize is going to rub people the wrong way, and I'm okay with that. I would love to have a conversation about that. It is actually good for there to be tension between the government and the church. It's good for there to be tension. The government as a whole, in many ways, is supposed to do the will of the people who elected them. Like, if you look at what the mandate for President Trump is, his mandate is to do the will of the people who voted him into office. He presented a platform. He presented a way of looking at the country, a way of looking at the world and America's role in the world. He presented a set of policies, an approach to handling the problems that people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And then people voted for him and elected him. And then he has an obligation to follow through on his word. But as we know, lots of people didn't vote for Donald Trump. Lots of people didn't vote for him. President Trump does not represent every single individual in the country. There are millions and millions of people who did not vote for him. And in a sense, it's important for any elected official to be mindful of everyone they serve, because President Trump is president of every American, whether they voted for him or not. He's supposed to be mindful of that. He's supposed to take care of that, or be sensitive to that at least. But his duty is to follow through on what he was elected to go do. His duty is to fulfill the promises that he made and to uphold the Constitution. That's what his duty is. The church does not have that duty. The church does not have that responsibility. The church is supposed to be a voice crying out in the wilderness, saying to everyone in power and influence and everyone who's not in power and influence, don't forget the importance of the individual. Every human life matters. Every human life has dignity. John Paul II was adamant about this. His philosophy of personalism was that a human being is an end in themselves and can never be used as a means to an end. It is essential for the church to communicate that voice and to have that voice and to be strong in that voice, even if it ruffles feathers, even if it's annoying, frustrating, or counterproductive to the government that is in charge, because that government is thinking about the aggregate. It's thinking about the masses, specifically the masses who voted for them. The church is supposed to think about the individual and the dignity of the individual. And that tension, because you have to have a government, you have to have a government that functions, you have to have rule of law, you have to have these things. And the rule of law is actually what's good for the majority of people, right? It's best for the majority of people that the speed limit be 35 miles per hour in this area or whatever. It's not best for everyone, but it's best for the majority of people and the majority of drivers, right? But the church is not meant to do that. The church is meant to have a very specific and important voice in the culture and in this context. And that voice is, don't forget the individual. So even if you agree, even if you're sitting here and you're agreeing and you're being like, if someone is an illegal immigrant into the United States, they didn't come in here properly, they need to exit, especially if they're a criminal. They need to not be here. Even if you're staunchly in that position, the church still has an important voice to say that even if that's the case, you have a duty and an obligation to treat that human being with dignity and respect. And for the church to stand as a reminder of that is one of the highest forms and most important roles that the church plays in public life. Anytime somebody does something as messy as the immigration process is right now, individual people, souls, are going to be harmed in that process. And someone needs to speak for them. Someone needs to call to attention. Even if you think you're doing the right thing, even if it is the right thing, still be mindful of the individual. Be mindful of the people who fall through the cracks. I am so for the church playing that role. With everything that's happened in the context of the Catholic Church, with everything that's happened over the last, in particular, 25 years, the world has sorely missed the moral authority of the Catholic Church being able to speak into situations like this and elevate the dignity of the human person. And pushing back hard in a way that moves hearts and moves minds. Like, the world has missed that. Now, we can say whatever we want to about how, the church has rightfully lost its place as a moral authority. Like, that's a different conversation. But the world has missed it. And I'm totally here for the church being in a role and in a position where it truthfully and charitably reminds all of us at every turn that every single soul matters. Because to the church, there is no American or German or Italian. There's just people of God. So, two thoughts kind of wrapped into one. As you reflect this week, go into your prayer, think about Ordo Amoris, think about the principle of love God, love self in a healthy way, love neighbor, and pray that the church finds its way to being an effective and meaningful and virtuous voice to respect human life. May God bless you, and remember, you were made to do hard things.